Are you just starting out in your spiritual journey and feeling overwhelmed? Are you not progressing and falling into that perpetual beginner trap? In today's video, I got for you a crucial top 5 tips for all magical white belts to set you up for maximum success going forward. Hello everyone, I am Solomon Pakal. I am a generational brujo. I am a historian and occult researcher. I've got over 20 years in the game, 20 years in theory and praxis. These top 5 or top 10 tips for beginner videos are a dime a dozen, but I'll tell you from professional experience in other mediums that getting world-class coaches, various opinions, is always worth it. I have a combat sports analyst background, and I'll just tell you, I can learn things about the jab from 5 different world-class coaches, and they will all be maybe similar, but they'll be worthwhile. Maybe not even different, but they'll be small micro differences that I do take value from. Number 1, assess your beliefs. So what does that mean? Oftentimes we get into magic to rebel or to reprogram our minds from what we think religious thinking is. However, we overestimate our ability to separate ourselves from the paradigm from which the religion we come from is. What do I mean by that? Social norms, status quos are all falling in between regular society and basic casual religious structure. So if you grew up Christian, you have a certain type of belief structure. And while you may want to start being more hedonistic and get back to pagan ways where you're wearing animal pelts and you're a bit more about free love and drinking alcohol, you might find that the culture of which you are trying to get back to has so much less in common with you than Christianity does. This conundrum will present problems going forward with the practice. The best example that I can come up with is one that I experienced in plentiful amounts with other people when I was in the Santeria communities of the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. A common philosophical conundrum with all things Ifa is the notion of animal sacrifice, where there was plenty of people that did not want to perform animal sacrifice. However, animal sacrifice is not really very optional when in Orisha worship. It is an essentiality. And I have heard of some kind of substitutions here and there, but from what I learned from my old padrino and madrina, there are certain non-negotiables. Animal offerings to the Orishas are basically a non-negotiable. And we're talking copious amounts. I myself was squeamish when having to offer a pigeon to one of the Orishas when I was a teenager. What I find is that there are certain people that want to get into pagan worship, but when it comes to actually doing certain things that are non-negotiable with the path, they do not want to do those, and they opt to distastefully adapt their practice to the path to where it doesn't even resemble the original pagan path. So step 1 is to assess your beliefs and find out really how far are you willing to go to try and be different and to adopt a different path. Because you might be adopting a path that you actually don't philosophically agree with. When you have these philosophical disagreements, you can run into major problems, whether they are of the more psychosis variety or just by getting into arguments with other people in those pagan communities. My second tip is understand that a magical or spiritual practice is a practice, and you have to practice in order to get better. Do not fall for the run-of-the-mill Hollywood idea of magic where you do a simple spell and all kinds of things contrary to nature happen effortlessly for you. That is not the case. It is oftentimes that magic takes the path of least resistance when manifesting. This is not simply a cop-out. This is actually a cornerstone of animism, one of the modalities of magic that many people follow these days. But I, in particular, it's one of the models of Mesoamerican and Mayan magic, is animism. In animism, everything in existence is essentially holy or has some kind of holy property. Therefore, when things manifest, they will manifest through those real things. And they will manifest through reality. That's why magic can seem mundane at times, because oftentimes it is. I have manifestations that do seem a bit more miraculous at times, that don't make sense. That is definitely for sure. But that's not going to be the majority of magic when it doesn't have to jump through hoops it doesn't have to. So, given that, and understanding that there is some kind of, at least resistance or basic hurdles that one has to get through, you can get through these hurdles with just committing to some practice. Committing to some practice time, committing to some practice repetitions. Discipline is a necessity in a magical practice. If you are not disciplined, and you do not push through discomfort, if you're not disciplined through discomfort, you will not succeed. You will be stuck as a perpetual beginner. Part of all these tips that I'm giving, the whole point of me making this video for beginners is to make sure, or to provide you tools to make sure you're not a beginner anymore. That's my point. Because if you constantly consume beginner media, you're not progressing. You are simply a consumer of this witchcraft culture, and you're not actually bettering your life. It becomes not too far removed from a theatric play. Continuing on this note of understanding that a practice is a practice, I'll give you another example of this idea of wanting quick results and being promised quick results, but them As I mentioned, I was in the combat sports realm. I was an amateur MMA fighter, but before that, I was in the Army, and I wanted to get into more functional martial arts to help me just in case I was deployed. So I looked at the more, I guess, like functional or like street fighting militaristic martial arts systems. And this was before I became a certified and combatives instructor. I took up Krav Maga. And Krav Maga promises that within a 3-day workshop and then like subsequent practice sessions, that you will essentially become pretty lethal. Why? Because the Israeli military uses it, and they have some of the best soldiers in the world, and they're able to train them within record time. So that becomes a testimonial for Krav Maga as like an apex martial arts, a cutting edge thing. It's better than everything else, right? When I took my Krav Maga to an MMA gym, I got pieced up and I got destroyed. And I'm not even talking about like getting taken to the ground. I'm talking about like simple striking. Krav Maga is almost like the law of attraction, but for martial arts. Because the way that it's structured is that they put some new metal music on and then you just go ham on pads. So what's the framework here? It's promising you results, and it makes you think you're getting results because they fill the room with a kind of energy, and then because you're hitting pads, you feel like you're getting things done. But that's not actual practice. That's not actual repetitions. That's just saying, start seeing red and go, and just go really hard. Aim for this target, that target, and that target. If they do that, you do that. If they do this, then you do this. And it's like a hot pocket, like those microwave meals of the hot pocket. It's kind of like the hot pocket of martial arts. Once I got my ass kicked enough at an MMA gym, I really developed a love for Muay Thai. And I also did Jeet Kune Do as well, which Jeet Kune Do I do like better than Krav Maga, but it is still promising like outlandish things. The best Jeet Kune Do stuff made its way to MMA, or at least the methodologies did. But the thing is that it's not arguing that MMA is just better. What makes MMA or like Muay Thai and striking for combat sports, what makes that better than Krav Maga? What makes it better is that you're actually able to practice it. You're actually able to practice it with more realistic, believe it or not, drills. Because if you say your results are going to happen so fast because they're so deadly, and because you can strike the eyes and you can strike the groin then you don't have much to practice with. And you don't have things to train your distance and your timing, or even like your power, smashing pads multiple times with a coach that provides you an optimal target or provides you a problematic target, but a live target. Krav Maga is like the feel-good version of martial arts. I go through all of that to say that actually becoming like a lethal martial artist takes time, and it needs to be done with exercises that you can replicate. And if your practice doesn't have that, then you need that to actually progress. Do not fall for these weekend warrior solutions or these microwave magic solutions. Those are nice tricks, but tricks fall short pretty quickly. Practice and actual understanding and application of fundamentals, that will take you to professional heights. My third tip is to research different paths. You are not going to find a path that completely caters to you. Certain things will have to be adapted, but adaptation isn't the first thing that you should be aiming to do. You should be really aiming to have a in-depth knowledge of whatever you are going to commit your spirit to. You want to be respectful of the path, but you also want to be respectful of the practitioners that came before you. Especially if it's a ethnic practice, such as many of the Vedic traditions. There's a lot of Westerners that get involved in things like that. And I've seen some really good practitioners, and then I've seen some practitioners that they fetishize the idea of it, and then what they're practicing isn't even really that path. It's just it's like a Western hemisphere consumer-based version of it. The other reason to research different paths is this. Oftentimes what is popular is not oftentimes what is best. It's McDonald's magic. It's the McDonaldization of certain paths, certain deities, to make products and trends out of. I've been on podcasts where I kind of air out some of my frustrations about particular fetishizations of deities and how they've essentially just become like the new action figure for the occult community. And I don't think it would be too much of a problem if they were articulating the practice well, but I'll give you a hint. One of those practices, like, I ethnically come from, and I see people all the time just have no understanding or respect for the culture or the context from which the deity comes from or the spirit comes from, and it's leading to worst lives. That's another like kind of 0.5 tip. I'll give you this. There's a lot of occultists out there. There's a lot of practitioners out there that will get involved with a spirit or a certain model of practice, and their lives will be falling apart. Perhaps slowly, perhaps quickly, but they will still attest to how good that spirit or that model of practice is serving them, because they don't want to face the facts that they made the wrong decision and they were misled. And typically they mislead themselves. So do your research upon the path. Number 4, I think people are weaning off of this one better these days, but intention is not everything. There are just way too many metaphysical factors that have significance to say that intention is everything. I think where this notion really comes from is emergency magic, where if you are in a predicament, you are in some kind of austere environment or social situation where you can't get to your altar or some kind of sacred space or a private space to pray, maybe you'll just do like an emergency magic in the bathroom. That is completely fine, because it is better to do something than nothing. But from that something that you do, there are various degrees of better that you can do. So intention is not everything. Every magical path is a part of some kind of greater paradigm. Yes, even chaos magic is it has greater cosmological mechanics that even if they are undefined, they are understood to be something bigger than you. Even if it is your perception, there's certain things that your perception cannot argue with. A pretty grounded example is you can have all the intention in the world, but you still have to abide by the laws of gravity. While the esoteric arts aren't as prevalent as gravity, or at least they may not seem from the naked eye, gravity is a pretty fair example to compare them to. They are unseen currents of nature that have, you could say, have yet to be discovered, or they are just higher on the echelons of reality. Fair note, even scientists can't explain how gravity works. The theoretical graviton particle is supposed to be able to explain it, but they have yet to find it. So gravity itself is pretty esoteric. And it doesn't matter how much intention you have, you're not going to be able to beat it. My fifth, and I would say most helpful tip, is to practice art. Why? There's a lot of people, including myself, that we grew up in school and we were told we weren't good artists, so we just said we're not good artists and we settled on that. If I were you, I would start just prioritizing a little bit, getting better at art, getting better at drawing. The reason is because no matter what your path is, or I should say from the large array of paths one can choose, right? You will more than likely have to draw some sacred symbols. And if your sacred symbols look funky, you're not going to feel very magical, and it can impede on your performance. Yes, there's an argument to be made that drawing the symbol period should be enough because it's like a higher power than you, but it can still screw with your performative mindset. And if you're not feeling confident, the chances of the magic working, they're just not as good. They can still happen. I've had crappy rituals that still manifest some things, but it's not, why would you settle? You know what I'm saying? It's like, why would you settle for something when you could be a bit more optimal? Trust me, practice your art. You're going to be thanking me later. I'll give you an example. I have to do a lot of drawing of hieroglyphs for my practice. For certain Ars Paulina rituals, I would do a lot of different kinds of scripts. Passing of the river script, Theban script, etc. And if also like the drawing of pentacles, like Solomonic pentacles, if it looks jacked up, you're not going to want to work with it. Especially something like a Solomonic pentacle, it's supposed to be a ritual item. Or even if you wanted to carry it on your person, you're not going to feel very empowered if you're carrying a ugly, like jankety pentacle on you. So practice art because you're going to have to call upon those skills more often than not. I understand that there are certain vendors for certain magical items, but there are going to be some elements of magic of which you can't buy, and you have to actually draw. So get acquainted with artwork. Get acquainted with your artistic skill.